guys, welcome to another episode of Rock Bottom Airsoft. It's good to see you again. If this is your first time here, then as always it is good to see you, and I hope you're going to stick around. Okay, well, welcome to our weekend video. As those of you who follow the channel already may know, I normally look to upload 2 videos a week. We normally do a midweek video on a Wednesday, and that's normally gameplay related. I've been out to a game previously. We'll get some footage up there of some of the gear we look at here at the weekends, in the field as it were, and see how they hold up. And at the weekends we look at everything airsoft related, tech, gear, replica reviews, unboxings, and everything in between in our great sport and hobby that is airsoft. So with that out of the way, you all know that already. What we're going to be looking at today, well, we're going to do a very quick short video today. I thought it might be interesting to look at my 5 favourite modifications. Now this isn't all inclusive, and this is mainly related to electric replicas or AEG'S, but these are 5 of my favourite upgrades or modifications, whatever you want to call it, that can improve performance on your AEG. Now I've done videos previously looking at these kinds of things, but this one is just my personal favourite ones. They're not specifically any cheap or easy to do or anything like that. It's just these are the ones that I think you can get a noticeable improvement out of your AEG with, in consideration of other factors, because it's important to remember if you're upgrading anything on a replica, or indeed anything else, whether that be a car, a replica, or any piece of machinery, everything kind of works in tandem. So one part will complement another part, and it doesn't necessarily mean that by changing the one part on its own you're going to see that benefit. So please remember that I'm taking a lot for granted in these recommendations, and I will mention what those are as we look at each item in turn. Okay, so the first thing that we'll look at is, I always recommend lubrication. And here we have some silicone grease, which is from Abbey. Just as an example, within the gearbox I tend to use Teflon grease, various greases that I look at. They're mainly synthetic, but Superlube is a brand I particularly like for gearbox grease. It's not specifically an airsoft grease, but it is a very high quality grease that works down to very cold temperatures and very high temperatures, which works great for our gearboxes, especially if you play outdoors like I do, because when they start up they can be quite cold. So what I'm meaning by greasing is not necessarily the look of the replica and keeping everything nice and rust free. I mean, that's important as well, but what I mean for upgrades is you'll see a lot of videos online and on here on YouTube for shimming. But one thing you can do if you're not confident with your shimming is keep the shimming how it is, but you'd be amazed at the difference it can make just by stripping your gearbox down, cleaning all the old grease out, degreasing it, getting it all nice and shiny again, and then applying a very thin film of grease to your gears and making sure that everything is nicely lubricated inside the gearbox. I've had instances where the shimming that has been done from the factory has been absolutely fine, and when I've re-greased the gearbox, it's quietened it down no end, and you sometimes get a minor bump in performance. You may draw less current because obviously there's less resistance, and that in turn may also lead to a slight bump in your rate of fire. It's probably not going to be noticeable, but you know that the machine that you're using is working as well as it can do. So that's the first thing that I would always say: re-grease, clean out and re-grease your gearbox, and that should give you a bump in both the quality of sound that your gearbox makes and also potentially a bump in performance as well. Now obviously I know some of you guys in the comments are going to say that if you re-grease, that a lot of manufacturers use the grease as packing, so your shimming might be off. So like I was saying before, that one upgrade can complement another. Just double check that it sounds okay, that you're happy with the shimming after you've re-greased, because it may be that you do have to re-shim. But as I say, in many instances I've found that you do not have to re-shim the gearbox. All it needed was a bit of a clean out, a bit of a re-grease. And that especially goes for if you're buying a pre-owned replica, because you don't know how many rounds have gone through it. So it's always worth opening up the gearbox, having a look what the internals look like, and if everything's okay, you'll probably find that the grease is old, it's gone tacky, it may have metal filings in it. Overall, it'll just do you a world of good to empty out all that old grease, get it nicely cleaned out and re-grease. So that's the first that I always find helps improve the performance of my replica, is some good quality, well applied grease in the gearbox, on the gears, on your pinion gear, everything that's a moving part in there with the correct quantity of grease. Okay, so the next one we'd look at, and this one probably a lot of you guys out there will already know. This is a package for an ASG Ultimate hot bucking. However, as probably many of you will know already, that is not an ASG Ultimate hot bucking that's in there. That's a G&G green hot bucking. I just used the package so I wouldn't lose the hot bucking that I took off another replica. But one of the best upgrades you can do, and this can make one heck of an improvement to your performance, is changing out the hot rubber or hot bucking and nub. And you can see in there I've got a H-fang nub in there. Might not make it out on camera because the nub is tiny. But if you change your hot bucking, that can make a world of difference to the range of your replica, to the weight of BB that you can successfully hop. And in some cases, it may improve your air seal because the bucking you have may be ripped, it may be torn, may be badly worn out, or it might just not be a good bucking that's matched to your replica. But a hot bucking can have huge effects on the performance of your replica, and it can be well worth investing in. And again, another side effect of that is it's not very expensive for a hot bucking, and it is a very easy job to do. You don't have to open the gearbox or anything. I did a video here on the channel showing you how to replace your hot bucking and your hop unit. And indeed, if you want to change your hop unit, that's another option as well. We can look at that. I've done a video how to change it, but we can look at that, why that's an improvement, in another video if we look at these favourite upgrades again. I'll just have to see what you guys think in the comments. But the hop-up bucking is definitely one of my favourite upgrades to do. It's affordable, easy to do, and you get instant improvement if the bucking works well with your replica. Let's remember there's a bit of trial and error. You might encounter instances where it's a bit tight on the lips, and that can cause you to have misfeed issues. However, most of the time, if you find a good quality hot bucking, I like the Promi purples, I like the G&G blues. I've had problems with jams on some modern replicas with these G&G greens, but the blues are very good. They will improve your range, and if it increases your air seal, it'll give you a little bit of bumping power, and it'll also give you better consistency as well. And as I was mentioning earlier about some upgrades complementing others, this is another one where I'm assuming that your air seal in your replica is good. Because if your air seal is poor, you'll still get increased hop ability with a new hot bucking, but you might not see that bumping power because you're going to be leaking air in other places. So a hot bucking and nub is definitely a worthwhile upgrade for you, and one of my favourites. While you're changing that hot bucking and nub, that brings us on to our next one, changing your inner barrel. Now, barrel length in Airsoft does not make a huge difference to accuracy, but it can affect your output power. In other words, you can get more FPS by fitting a slightly longer barrel, but only, as we were mentioning about upgrades complementing each other, if your cylinder is correctly ported. Now, I'm not going to go too much into detail about that because obviously we get into volumetric efficiency of your cylinder. That's going to be a bit more than a short video on my 5 favourite upgrades. But with that by the by, if you go for a tighter bore barrel, what you'll find with that is it will increase power ever so slightly. So you'll get more feet per second with a tight bore barrel. Also worth remembering, you have a higher risk of jams with a tight bore barrel. But if you go down to a 6.03mm in a barrel, I've never had any problems with those jamming. So you should be okay down to that size. Now, barrel length, as I say, that's up to yourself. There's a bit of trial and error in that. You might get a bump in performance if you go for a longer barrel. But the main reason to change your barrel is if you go for a stainless steel barrel, you're not going to have any risk of corrosion. They'll be a lot better finished. The inside of the barrel, although they look shiny, a lot of the factory barrels are okay. But aftermarket barrels usually have a really, really nice machine finish. and nice chamfering on the end, which all aids consistency. And if you've been following this channel for a while, you'll know that I'm all about consistency. The more consistent your replica is, the more accurate you are, because it's going to keep getting out to the same range shot after shot, and hopefully hitting a similar spot, giving you better accuracy with consistency. So an inner barrel, I'd say it's one of my favourite mods, because again, it's easy to do. You can do it while you're changing your hop bucking or your hop up unit, and again, you will notice maybe a slight improvement in range dependent on how your other parts are working together. But it's just really, from my point of view, it's one of my favourites, because it gives me that peace of mind that if it's raining hard outside and I have a stainless barrel in there, I'm not going to have any problems with rust and corrosion. Now obviously you should be cleaning out and drying your barrel after a game, but if you're in mid-game, it's always a concern that you're going to get little bits of corrosion in there, and it's not going to do it any good. And obviously you get a nice, shiny, smooth finish on the inside of the barrel. So that would be my next one, would be to change an inner barrel. It's a nice, effective upgrade. Again, easy to do is the advantage. Now this should come as no surprise to many of you guys who follow the channel. One of my very favourite upgrades is a MOSFET. I don't care if you do an optical trigger ETU with a MOSFET built in, with all singing, all dancing, it's got all the toys on it. That doesn't matter. Any MOSFET is better than no MOSFET at all. Even if it's a very basic MOSFET just for protecting your trigger contacts, a MOSFET will improve your trigger response, makes your electrical system far more efficient overall. And if you get one that's programmable, it gives you an endless amount of features that you wouldn't normally get. And as I say, you don't need to replace the trigger unit to get those programmable features. A lot of the Gate range, the Perrin range, the Jeftron range, they all give you options for inline MOSFETs that are programmable. MOSFETs, loads of uses. They protect your battery, again, if they have those features, but they can protect it with inbuilt fuses. They make your electrical system overall more efficient. They prevent damage to your trigger contacts over time, and it gives you that extra peace of mind to run a more powerful battery that you wouldn't otherwise be able to use. And as I mentioned, we're not doing this as a complete list, because a battery is a really good upgrade on your replica that's easy to do, but what we're looking at is my favourite ones. And the MOSFET is definitely a peace of mind item, protects a lot of the electrical system, but also gives you a noticeable bump in both the features and performance of your replica, depending on which one you get, but they will all bump performance. So a MOSFET for me is definitely one of my favourite upgrades. Not the easiest to do. If you're doing it on a version 2 gearbox, you'll have to open the gearbox to get to your trigger contacts. On every other gearbox, you're going to have to do some soldering, unless you've got one of the G&G ETUs, and this Perrin, for example, is plug and play. And so far I've been really pleased with it. It's worked really well for me. But most MOSFETs are going to require soldering. You'll see adverts for MOSFETs that you just plug in and they say they plug and play. Well, those plug-in MOSFETs will give you the features such as burst fire and that kind of thing, but they are not doing the job that the MOSFET on that PCB is designed to do, because the MOSFET has to be soldered across your trigger contacts. Otherwise, it isn't protecting those trigger contacts at all. I don't care what anybody says, if it's not soldered across the trigger contacts, it isn't bypassing that circuit, and therefore it's not protecting them. So you are going to have to do some soldering to get the benefits of an actual MOSFET. You can get a programmable trigger unit that doesn't have a MOSFET, or you can get an inline plug-in device that will allow you to do burst fire and things like that, but that is not a MOSFET. It might have a MOSFET on there, but unless it's soldered across those trigger contacts, it isn't doing the job that a MOSFET's supposed to do. So that's a worthwhile upgrade. So if you're okay with soldering, it should be a relatively easy job, but it's well worth doing. So MOSFET's my next one. And then the last one for today that we'll look at is a motor, a new motor. Now this is just a basic bog standard motor that I've got you to show you an example of a motor. And this is a motor out of a version 2 gearbox, or also known as a long shaft motor. Now I did do a video on motors explaining all about them, so I won't go too much into detail. But there's lots of motors to choose from, and your motor is one of the few upgrades that will give you an instant upgrade. You'll notice straight away the performance of your replica improve. It's not going to improve the power or anything if you haven't changed anything else, but it will give you an instantly better trigger response. Rate of fire will probably be bumped up as well. So well worth doing, easy to do as well. Get it adjusted correctly and you should see a noticeable improvement in the performance of your AEG immediately by installing that. So there you go guys, that's 5 of my favourite upgrades for today. As I say, there's a lot more upgrades we could cover and there's a lot more that come in my favourites as well. But if you enjoyed this video and it's giving you some food for thought, then let me know in the comments, because I will always respond to a comment. I might not get back to you straight away, but I will always respond. And if you want me to do some more like this, where I show some of my favourite upgrades, I can do, because as I say, we haven't covered batteries here, and we haven't covered the connector that you use, such as Dean's or XT90s. I always like changing the connectors. It's the first job I do on my replicas. But there are loads of upgrades I can go through, guys, that I like, that are worth doing. So if you want to see another video with 5 more of the upgrades that I consider worth doing, then let me know in the comments and then we can get another one put together. If you have enjoyed this video, which I really hope you have, guys, then do please drop a like on it. And if you've been enjoying my channel in general, then please do subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss any of my uploads and any bonus uploads I may do. And if you want any more content from myself, you can find Rock Bottom Airsoft on Facebook and Instagram. There are pictures and little bits and bats on there about the things I've been up to in Airsoft, or maybe projects I'm working on. So if that sounds like your thing, go and check me out on there as well. But apart from that, guys, thanks very much for watching, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one.